Hi, it's Ms. Bauer again from Laurel Elementary School, sharing a read aloud with you today. And just want to remind you these videos are for Laurel students. They are not meant to share with the general public. I'm using YouTube as a platform temporarily, and I would prefer if they do not get shared. They are specifically for Laurel students. Today is Thursday, March 19th. It is day 2 of Ms. Bauer's Read Alouds. Today we are going to read a very famous story. The title is called A Bad Case of Stripes. Most kids, I would imagine, are somewhat familiar with this story. The author is a gentleman named David Shannon, and David Shannon wrote a lot of children's books. He may be most famous for his book about the character named David, and it is published by a company called Scholastic, which I think a lot of our parents are familiar with, and a lot of our kids are familiar with this sign here, Scholastic. We get a lot of our books from Scholastic, and we have parent book clubs and things that you can order from Scholastic. This story is fiction, and one of the ways I know it's fiction right away is the text features. The main one that I see right away are the illustrations. I'm very drawn to the colorful illustrations that look almost like paintings. David Shannon did the illustrations as well as the writing. His illustrations are colorful. They show mood and tone. They show the expression of the characters. They are not photographs. Also in this story, to help me know that it's fiction, there's dialogue. And dialogue means that people are talking in the story. So I'm going to read you an example, and I'm also going to show you. "Excuse me," she said brightly, "but I think I can help. And I want to show you how you know people are talking in a story." I'm going to push this way up close. Down here, I can see quotation marks. "Excuse me." So she begins talking here, and she ends talking there, and that shows that she's talking. And when there's talking in a story, it's called dialogue. And we don't have any chapters in this story because it's a picture book, but we certainly have characters. Our main character is called Camilla Cream, and I believe, again, the author intentionally made her name sound a little bit funny. Camilla Cream with the k sound. When we're dealing with fiction, we are talking mostly about developing a character or character development. We focus on the plot, the beginning, the middle, and the ending of a story. And in this story, we have a theme. The author is trying to give us a message, and that is the theme of the story. You will figure it out by the end, and if not, I will mention what the theme of the story is from my point of view, what I think. And not everybody will agree with me. It really doesn't matter what theme you think it is, as long as you can back it up with text evidence. So you can't just make something up at random, but if you truly believe that the theme is something, back it up with text evidence, and then you're good to go. I'm going to start reading this story called A Bad Case of Stripes. When I do these read alouds, really just relax, sit back, and enjoy hearing the story. I'm going to sit up nice and close so that you can see the illustrations and hear my voice. You probably won't be able to see the words very well. A Bad Case of Stripes. Camilla Cream loved lima beans, but she never ate them. All of her friends hated lima beans, and she wanted to fit in. Camilla was always worried about what other people thought of her. Today she was fretting even more than usual. It was the first day of school, and she couldn't decide what to wear. There were so many people to impress. She tried on 42 outfits, but none seemed quite right. She put on a pretty red dress and looked in the mirror. And then She screamed. Writing on this side, illustration. Focus on the illustration. Her mother ran into the room. She screamed too. "Oh, my heavens!" she cried. "You're completely covered with stripes." This was certainly true. Camilla was striped from head to toe. She looked like a rainbow. Mrs. Cream felt Camilla's forehead. "Do you feel all right?" she asked. "I feel fine," Camilla answered, "but just look at me." "You get back into bed this instant," her mother ordered. "You're not going to school today." Camilla was relieved. She didn't want to miss the first day of school, but she was afraid of what the other kids would say. And she had no idea what to wear with all those crazy stripes. That afternoon, Dr. Bumble came to examine Camilla. "Most extraordinary," he exclaimed. "I've never seen anything like it. Are you having any coughing, sneezing, runny nose, aches, pains, chills, hot flashes, dizziness, drowsiness, shortness of breath, or uncontrollable twitching?" "No," Camilla told him. "I feel fine." "Well, then," Dr. Bumble said, turning to Mrs. Cream, "I don't see any reason why she shouldn't go to school tomorrow. Here's some ointment. That should clear up those stripes in a few days. If it doesn't, you know where to reach me." And off he went. The next day was a disaster. Everyone at school laughed at Camilla. They called her Camilla Crayon and Night of the Living Lollipop. She tried her best to act as if everything were normal, but when the class said the Pledge of Allegiance, her stripes turned red, white, and blue, and she broke out in stars. The other kids thought this was great. One yelled out, "Let's see some purple polka dots." Sure enough, Camilla turned all purple polka dotty. Someone else shouted, "Checkerboard!" and a pattern of squares covered her skin. Soon everyone was calling out different shapes and colors, and poor Camilla was changing faster than you can change channels on a TV. That night, Mr. Harms, the school principal, called. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Cream," he said. "I'm going to have to ask you to keep Camilla home from school. She's just too much of a distraction, and I've been getting calls from other parents. They're afraid those stripes may be contagious." Camilla was so embarrassed. She couldn't believe that 2 days ago everyone liked her. Now nobody wanted to be in the same room with her. Her father tried to make her feel better. "Is there anything I can get you, sweetheart?" he asked. "No, thank you," sighed Camilla. What she really wanted was a nice plate of lima beans. But she had been laughed at enough for one day. Well, yes, I see," Dr. Bumble mumbled when Mr. Cream phoned him the next day. "I think I'd better bring in the specialists. We'll be right over." About an hour later, Dr. Bumble arrived with 4 people in long white coats. He introduced them to the Creams. "This is Dr. Grop. I'm going to say that again. This is Dr. Grop, Dr. Sponge, Dr. Cricket, and Dr. Young." Then the specialists went to work on Camilla. They squeezed and jabbed, tapped and tested. It was very uncomfortable. "Well, it's not the mumps," concluded Dr. Grop. "Or the measles," said Dr. Sponge. "Definitely not chicken pox," put in Dr. Cricket. "Or sunburn," said Dr. Young. "Try these," said the specialists. They handed her a bottle filled with different colored pills. "Take one of each before bed," said Dr. Gropp. Then they filed out the front door, followed by Dr. Bumble. This is my favorite picture. That night, Camilla took her medicine. It was awful. When she woke up the next morning, she did feel different, but when she got dressed, her clothes didn't fit right. She looked in the mirror, and there, staring back at her, was a giant, multicolored pill with her face on it. Dr. Bumble rushed over as soon as Mrs. Cream called, but this time, instead of the specialists, he brought the experts. Dr. Gord and Mr. Mellon were the finest scientific minds in the land. Once again, Camilla was poked and prodded, looked at and listened. The experts wrote down lots of numbers. Then they huddled together and whispered. Dr. Gord finally spoke. "It might be a virus," he announced with authority. Suddenly, fuzzy little virus balls appeared all over Camilla. "Or possibly some form of bacteria," said Mr. Mellon. Out popped squiggly little bacteria tails. "Or it could be a fungus," added Dr. Gord. Instantly, Camilla was covered with different colored fungus blotches. The experts looked at Camilla, then at each other. "We need to go over these numbers again, back at the lab," Dr. Gord explained. "We'll call you when we know something." But the experts didn't have a clue, much less a cure. By now, the TV news had found out about Camilla. Reporters from every channel were outside her house telling the story of the bizarre case of the incredible changing kid. Soon, a huge crowd was camped out on the front lawn. There's Camilla. The Creams were swamped with all kinds of remedies from psychologists, allergists, herbalists, nutritionists, psychics, an old medicine man, a guru, and even a veterinarian. Each so-called cure only added to poor Camilla's strange appearance until it was hard to even recognize her. She sprouted roots and berries and crystals and feathers and a long furry tail. But nothing worked. One day, a woman who called herself an environmental therapist claimed she could cure Camilla. "Close your eyes," she said. "Breathe deeply and become one with your room." "I wish you hadn't said that," Camilla groaned. Slowly, she started to melt into the walls of her room. Her bed became her mouth. Her nose was a dresser, and 2 paintings were her eyes. The therapist screamed and ran from the house. "What are we going to do?" cried Mrs. Cream. "It just keeps getting worse and worse." She began to sob. And sob means cry. At that moment, Mr. Cream heard a quiet little knock at the front door. He opened it, and there stood an old woman who was just as plump and sweet as a strawberry. "Excuse me," she said brightly, "but I think I can help." She went into Camilla's room and looked around. "My goodness," she said with a shake of her head. What we have here is a bad case of stripes, one of the worst I've ever seen. She pulled a container of small green beans from her bag. Here, she said, these might do the trick. Are those magic beans? Asked Mrs. Cream. Oh, my, no, replied the kind old woman. There's no such thing. These are just plain old lima beans. I'll bet you'd like some, wouldn't you? She asked Camilla. Camilla wanted a big heaping plate full of lima beans more than just about anything, but she was still afraid to admit it. Yuck, she said. No one likes lima beans, especially me. Oh, dear, the old woman said sadly. I guess I was wrong about you. She put the beans back in her bag and started toward the door. Camilla watched the old woman walk away. Those beans would taste so good, and being laughed at for eating them was nothing compared to what she'd been going through. She finally couldn't stand it. Wait, she cried. The truth is, I really love lima beans. I thought so, the old woman said with a smile. She took a handful of beans and popped them into Camilla's mouth. Mmm, said Camilla. Suddenly, the branches, feathers, and squiggly tails began to disappear. Then the room swirled around. When it stopped, there stood Camilla, and everything was back to normal. I'm cured, she shouted. Yes, said the old woman. I knew the real you was in there somewhere. She patted Camilla on the head. Then she went outside and vanished into the crowd. Afterward, Camilla wasn't quite the same. Some of the kids at school said she was weird, but she didn't care a bit. She ate all the lima beans she wanted, and she never had even a touch of stripes again. And that's the end of our story called A Bad Case of Stripes. So before we talk about why Ms. Bauer selected this story, think for a minute about what do you think the author's message might be. In the beginning, we found out that Camilla actually liked lima beans, but she pretended she didn't because she didn't think it was cool to like lima beans. Everyone might make fun of her for liking that type of food. And then she had this terrible experience of turning into all these different things and changing shape and changing colors. And finally, when she acted like herself and chose exactly what she wanted, things got back to being normal and she could enjoy her life again. So I think the author's purpose, I think David Shannon's purpose here, is to remind us to try to be ourselves, even though there might be peer pressure, there might be things that make us feel like we shouldn't like something that we really like, but try to be true to yourself. Also, I don't think David Shannon is just talking about lima beans. I think he might be talking about liking other things too, that other kids might make you feel embarrassed about, or maybe other people that you live with, or maybe other people that you see around might make you feel embarrassed about something that you really treasure. So that concludes today's Read Aloud, A Bad Case of Stripes. This was a longer story today, so I'm going to leave it at that. If you guys want to use this for your reading log, again, you can use this and make a summary of it. I hope you enjoyed our story today, and I hope that you understand David Shannon's message. By the way, this was a level P story, LP, level P, that's a L. But as you can see, these read alouds aren't necessarily for you to read yourself. They are for you to understand and enjoy and use your imagination and learn new things and just have a nice story read to you. So I hope that worked. And this concludes day 2 of Read Alouds. And I hope you guys are all hanging in there. Everyone at Laurel School misses you, and we can't wait to see you again. And we are all trying to get through this. Thank you so much for participating, and have a great afternoon and day, and hope to see you soon. Please take care and stay as healthy as you can. Thank you. Bye, guys.